This morning, we continue our promise to feature at least one new book a week during the pandemic. Today, an exclusive about the biggest search in the history of the FBI and the capture of the most wanted man in America. Our focus, two authors and a former agent who changed the course of history. The target, James Whitey Bulger, the infamous Boston mobster, whose much-discussed story was largely incomplete until now. What you're about to see released for the first time are the last known photos of Whitey Bulger, along with a more accurate story of what happened while he was on the run and after he was caught, plus one final remaining mystery. The last known photo of Whitey Bulger alive is hardly in fitting with his menacing persona. It's him in prison with his Native American art teacher, another with the inmates he befriended. Miles away from decades of murder, mayhem, and the most exhaustive manhunt in FBI history. The full story now told in the new book, Hunting Whitey, by Dave Wedge and Casey Sherman.
As a writer, Dave and I have read everything that has been written about Whitey Bulger and his life of crime. But what about the 16 years that he was a fugitive? That story has not been told. What was his life like behind bars?
The hero of this story is a former agent who was running the case when Bulger was captured. Noreen Gleason hasn't spoken on camera about any of it since she left the Bureau 7 years ago. When you open the book for the first time, your name is the first two words in the book. Your reaction?
I had to close it.
Why did you close it?
There were so many people involved in this case, and it just made me a little uncomfortable, that's all. I eventually picked it back up a couple days later and started reading it and thought, this is pretty good.
James Whitey Bulger's life of crime that began in the 1950s eventually put him in charge of Boston's Winter Hill Gang for decades. He infamously manipulated FBI agent John Connolly, trading information and misinformation.
The only one who could do what I do is me.
Bulger's been portrayed loosely by Jack Nicholson in 2006's The Departed, and directly by Johnny Depp in 2015's Black Mass.
Get the FBI to fight our wars against our enemies.
He was about to be indicted and sent away when he slipped away on Christmas Eve 1994 and remained a fugitive for more than 16 years. How did he stay on the run for that long?
That was the thing that drove me crazy when I got to Boston. People thought that we did not want to catch him because we were afraid of what he might say if we did catch him. And there couldn't be anything further from the truth. The thing that really disturbed me the most was he was like a myth. It was almost had like a John Gotti, like Robin Hood type rapport with the neighborhood in Southie that he grew up in. And that just was never an okay thing for me.
I knew people who knew him, who talked about him, and there is that reverence for many of them still.
Yeah, it didn't work well. I'm like, this guy is, a stone cold killer.
Noreen Gleason helped solve the case by changing the game. Focused not on Bulger, but his girlfriend, Catherine Gregg.
We really never took a look at Catherine. I think a lot of people thought that Whitey had killed her. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. He needs women in his life. He's very dependent on women.
The FBI is trying something new to track down one of its most wanted suspects.
This is an announcement.
It's hoped someone will recognize the longtime girlfriend of fugitive Boston mob boss James Whitey Bulger, who's been...
The book is called Hunting Whitey, right? I hunt and fish up here all the time, but if I went hunting and I kept hunting every day for years, doing the same thing, but never was able to catch my prey, why would I continue to do it that way? So this was a great opportunity to just kind of flip the switch a little bit.
You weren't hunting Whitey, then you were hunting Catherine.
If you know how to hunt, you can always find what you're after if you just change the strategy.
She recognized that for so long, the FBI and other law enforcement agencies were hunting an elderly white man in sunglasses and a Red Sox hat. Now, I can walk down the street in Boston and spot 5 of those guys right away. And Noreen Gleason said, we're focused too much on him. Let's focus on his girlfriend. And that broke the case wide open.
We have captured one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives.
The ads that Gleason put together led to a tip from a woman from Iceland, of all places, who once knew Greg as the woman who fed stray cats. when the tipster, Greg and Bulger, all lived in the same Santa Monica, California neighborhood.
At approximately 5:45 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, using a ruse, agents and other task force members lured Mr. Bulger out of his apartment.
I think that he hid in plain sight. He really was a very disciplined person. He covered his tracks very well. He knew evasion techniques. So I think that he did a pretty good job, but at the end, we were better.
After Bulger was sent to prison, the first attempt on his life was made in less than a month. He was stabbed in the head and almost died. During recovery, he formed a friendship with an art teacher, Clement Chip Janis. Wedge and Sherman reveal the dozens of letters the two exchanged and the bond they shared.
This photo is, I mean, it's interesting to look at. Right? It's not what you'd expect to see of the last known photo of Whitey Bulger.
You know, every surveillance photo of Bulger, he's scowling, and it's shot from a distance. Here is Bulger behind prison walls, smiling, and it shows that the pressure was kind of off at that time. He didn't have to look over his shoulder anymore to get captured. He did to protect his life. And he would tell this fellow prisoner, when I get it, I hope they give it to me quick, because I gave it quick.
Bulger was eventually murdered in prison with a padlock and sock, less than 12 hours after mysteriously being transferred to a West Virginia facility in 2018. The main suspect is a former mobster who answered to La Cosa Nostra.
Why was Whitey killed in prison?
One is that he's a notorious rat. He's one of the biggest, most infamous rats ever in the history of organized crime. He put a lot of people in jail. His actions put a lot of people in the morgue, specifically Italian mobsters. Italian mobsters don't forget stuff like that.
No one has officially been charged in that case, but that open crime is far from the largest open question. When Bulger was captured, he was found with a cache of weapons and $800,000 hidden behind his apartment's walls. Bulger, however, spent decades stuffing away millions more in safety deposit boxes all over the country.
Do you think we'll ever find out where all that money is?
I think that people that know Bulger know where the money is, and the FBI agents that we interviewed for the book said, follow some of those people around, because eventually they're going to lead you to the lottery.
If there's millions of dollars still missing, where is it, and do you think it ever is found?
If those are assets that can still be seized somehow, and people are continuously working on this, then they'll come up with it.
You think it'll happen?
People thought that we would never get him, so I'm always very optimistic when it comes to that.
Today, as the search for the missing millions continues, Bulger is buried in a cemetery in West Roxbury, Massachusetts. Whitey's name is not on the grave.
When people think about Whitey Bulger today, what should they think?
Good riddance.
Dana Catherine Craig, Whitey Bulger's girlfriend, is now out of prison. She is living in the Boston area. Why is it important to find all that money if it's out there? Well, that money would go to victims and victims' families, those who were affected by Whitey Bulger's crimes.
I cannot wait to read that book. That is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Was already interested. Yeah, great job, Jeff.